In 1950, a camera in California took a picture of empty sky. 30 minutes later, it took another. 9 points of light had appeared that weren't there before. 6 days after that, they vanished completely. No satellites existed yet. Sputnik was still 7 years away. Nobody could explain what these 9 flickers of light were, so the photograph sat in an archive for 70 years, until an astronomer went looking for something else entirely, and instead found 100,000 more of them. Strange lights in the sky are not a new story. Long before radar, before cameras, before satellites, people looked up and saw things they could not explain. A 16th century account from the German city of Nuremberg describes crescents, spheres, and dark rods clashing in the morning sky before crashing to Earth in smoke. At the time, it was recorded as a divine omen. Today, someone familiar with modern reports of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, would recognize the shapes instantly. Spheres, cylinders, dark triangular forms. The same handful of silhouettes keep reappearing across centuries of human testimony. The trouble with almost all of this history is that it is anecdotal. A newspaper account is one writer's version of what a crowd claimed to see. There is no physical evidence, no instrumentation, and every witness has been dead for centuries. You can debate sundogs, ball lightning, or fireworks all day, and none of it can ever be settled, because there is no data left to examine. That is exactly the gap a Swedish astronomer named Beatrice Villa-Roll decided to close. Instead of chasing eyewitness stories, her team went looking for a data set that modern science could actually interrogate. Tens of thousands of archived sky photographs taken by professional observatories, on a schedule, with calibrated instruments, decades before anyone was hunting for aliens. This is the part that makes her approach genuinely different from almost every UAP investigation that came before it. Most UAP research works backward from a single sighting, one witness, one blurry photo, one radar blip, and then tries to rule out mundane explanations after the fact. Villa-Roll's team worked forward from an enormous archive of scientific data collected for an entirely unrelated purpose, then asked whether anything strange was hiding inside it. That distinction matters because it removes the most common criticism leveled at UAP claims, that witnesses see what they expect to see. Nobody photographing the sky for a stellar catalog in 1951 was looking for evidence of anything unusual. If something anomalous is genuinely present in that data, it got there without anyone's expectations shaping the result. Villa-Roll's team began with something almost unrelated to UAP. They were part of a project studying stars that appeared in old astronomical catalogs, but were nowhere to be found in the modern sky, essentially stars that seemed to have vanished. To do this, they combed through digitized photographic plates from the Palomar Observatory, a facility that began operating in the late 1940s, comparing them against modern all-sky surveys. Along the way, they noticed something odd. On one single plate, 9 points of light appeared that were absent 30 minutes earlier and gone again less than a week later. Astronomers call these transients, and in isolation they are not remarkable. Plates get scratched, chemicals degrade unevenly, cosmic rays strike the emulsion. But Villa-Roll systematically ruled out the boring explanations one by one. The pattern did not match asteroids. It did not match distant flaring galaxies. It did not match passing aircraft. It resembled, almost too closely, the glint of a polished metallic surface catching sunlight in an orbit roughly the height of a geostationary satellite. There was an obvious counter-argument. Reflective objects in orbit sound exactly like satellites, except the math does not work. The first artificial satellite in history, Sputnik, launched in 1957. The plate in question was exposed years before that. There was simply nothing built by humans up there yet to shine. Villa-Roll also considered whether radiation could be responsible, since the observatory sits within range of a former nuclear testing site in Nevada. But the timeline ruled that out too. No atomic tests were conducted during the specific window the anomalous plate was captured, so contamination from fallout could not explain what her team was seeing. One by one, the ordinary explanations kept failing to fit. That single plate could have stayed a curiosity. Instead, in late 2025, Villarroel's team published a far larger analysis. Over 100,000 similar transients found across nearly a decade of Palomar plates, spanning 1949 to 1957. This time they went further than describing the anomaly. They tried to test it statistically. Their first test used Earth's own shadow as a filter. If these points of light were genuine objects orbiting the planet and simply reflecting sunlight, they should disappear whenever they pass through Earth's shadow, the same way the moon dims during a lunar eclipse. If they were plate defects or background stars, the shadow of the Earth should make no difference at all. When the team ran the numbers, they reported a measurable drop in transients, specifically inside that shadow zone. Out of the full sample, they flagged 349 sightings as strong candidates for genuine reflective objects near Earth, rather than noise. The second test was even stranger. The team cross-referenced the timing of these transients against public UFO sighting reports from the same era. They claimed each reported UFO sighting correlated with roughly an 8.5% rise in the number of transients recorded on the plates that same day, even though members of the public obviously had no way of knowing what was happening on an astronomical photographic plate hundreds of miles away. Then there was the nuclear connection. Villarroel's team reported a 45% spike in transients on the days immediately following announced nuclear weapons tests. This detail lines up with a long-standing thread inside UAP research, a recurring claim that unidentified craft show unusual interest in nuclear weapons facilities. One frequently cited case involves Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming in 1970, where military personnel reported a cigar-shaped object overhead on the same night that 50 Minuteman missiles simultaneously and inexplicably dropped offline, an incident confirmed in official Air Force records, even though the object itself was never officially acknowledged. To be clear about what this data cannot tell us, even if every one of those 349 sightings is exactly what Villarroel proposes, it does not confirm intent, and it does not confirm intelligence. A cluster of naturally occurring reflective debris, something like unusually shiny micrometeorite fragments briefly catching sunlight at high altitude, could in theory produce a similar signature without any need for an exotic explanation. Statistics can tell you that something is there and behaving in a specific, testable way. They cannot by themselves tell you what that something is built from, or who, if anyone, built it. None of this proves anything on its own, and Villarroel's conclusions have faced serious pushback. Her paper was rejected by the preprint platform Archive for allegedly lacking sufficient scholarly rigor, a rare and pointed rejection. A separate research team, led by Wesley Andres Waters, published a direct rebuttal. They argued that the true way to confirm whether these transients were real objects, rather than damage to the physical plate, would be to examine the original glass under a microscope rather than relying on digital scans, something Villarroel's team did not do. Waters also could not reproduce her dataset using the same public archive, and when his team applied stricter filtering to remove likely artifacts, the sample shrank dramatically, from around 100,000 transients down to roughly 5,000. Using that smaller, cleaner dataset, the Earth's shadow effect disappeared entirely, undermining the central claim. Villarroel pushed back in a formal response, arguing that Waters' filtering was so aggressive it discarded the very signal they were trying to measure, leaving a sample too small to draw reliable conclusions from. She reran her nuclear test analysis, correcting for observatory scheduling bias that Waters had flagged, and reported the correlation shrank, but did not vanish. Instead of 45%, she now reported an 11% increase. So where does that leave us? Not with proof. What it leaves us with is a genuinely rigorous new method for asking an old question, applying statistics and cross-reference datasets to a mystery that used to rely entirely on personal testimony. Whether these 349 glints in the dark are strange asteroids, imaging artifacts nobody has fully modeled yet, or something built and reflective in Earth's orbit before humans ever launched a single object into space, is still an open scientific argument. And that argument is happening in public, in published papers, between working scientists, rather than in anonymous forums. If a team of scientists can build a statistical case for unexplained objects using nothing but archived starlight from before the space age, it says something about how much history is still sitting in old data, waiting for someone to look again. Tell me in the comments, do you think Villarroel is onto something real, or do you side with the skeptics? Subscribe if you want to see where the next response paper in this debate goes, because there will almost certainly be one. And if this kind of evidence-based mystery is your thing, stick around, because there is a lot more where this came from.